Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I would like to review and respond to Ben Shapiro's review of The Rise of Skywalker. Now, you probably are wondering why, and there's actually a few reasons for this. Number one, like him or hate him, Ben is an extremely influential person. Now, he generally speaks in the world of politics, but every now and then he offers his take on a particular film. At the time of this recording, his review has over 538,000 views. So he's got quite a following, and quite a few people have listened to his review. Ben is a trusted source for many, and as such, he's likely to sway many with his take on a given film. So because of this, I think it would be really helpful to provide a response to some of his takes on this particular film. Secondly, his take on The Last Jedi was fairly good, and he touched on a lot of the issues that the film had. But his approach to this film seems to be a bit broken at the foundation. More on that later. Number 3, Ben is a formidable opponent in pretty much any intellectual endeavor, and as such, it should provide a pretty fun experience to try to respond to his take on this issue. Lastly, number 4, to be quite frank, I think Ben is wrong, and I really want to put out a video giving my reasons why I think Ben is wrong. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. That being said, for mainly copyright reasons, I'm gonna mostly just be using footage of video games for this. So I apologize if you really wanted extremely relevant visuals throughout. That's just not going to happen. But alrighty. Well, with that done, let's jump in, shall we?
If you've been familiar with the show at all, you know I've been incredibly critical of the new trilogy. I don't like the new trilogy. I think it was unnecessary. I think they were fools. I think they tried to split the babies.
So far, I agree with Ben. I was not overly into The Force Awakens when I saw it originally. I thought they basically tried to hide the fact that they were remaking Episode 4, down to even having an orphan kid on a sand planet who escapes that sand planet in the Millennium Falcon. Like, I just thought it was a remake. I think there's a lot more to be said about it, but that's not this video. And when I saw it, I hated The Last Jedi and have only grown to hate it more after that. So far, so good.
So there were two things they could have done. Originally, I have to preface my take on Rise of Skywalker with the other two movies because it doesn't work as a standalone film, nor is it really meant to.
So it doesn't work as a standalone film, but here's the problem. Where The Last Jedi left The Rise of Skywalker to pick up from, it kind of almost is a standalone film. I mean, you have some people that existed in previous films, but all the setups from The Force Awakens were gone. The Last Jedi murdered them, and Rian Johnson laughed maniacally as he did that. So, in a sense, and this isn't on The Rise of Skywalker, but in a sense, sorry, it almost is a standalone film.
This film, Rise of Skywalker, was designed specifically to retcon, meaning to go back in time and change the fact that Force Awakens and Last Jedi ever happened.
So I agree that it was absolutely to retcon The Last Jedi. That's pretty clear. I mean, the Holdo maneuver being 1 in a million, that was JJ saying, "Thanks for breaking the lore entirely, Ryan." Having Luke say that a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect. Having Luke say that he was wrong about being on the island. All of these things was basically... I wish Luke had looked into the camera and said, "Yeah, Ryan." Anyway, but I don't think it was meant to retcon The Force Awakens. I don't think JJ meant to do that. Now, he may have accidentally retconned some of it, but I don't think that was the purpose. But let's see what his case is for them not only retconning The Last Jedi, but also The Force Awakens.
It basically revises the entire story in a much more satisfying way.
Yeah, that's where we're going to have to part ways here, Ben. Satisfying? Ooh, that's, yeah. I don't think it was satisfying in the slightest. But let's hear the case he makes.
Okay, so here was my original take on this new trilogy. There are two ways that Disney could have gone. Disney, number one, could have recast the entire original Return of the Jedi. They could have recast somebody as Luke, recast somebody as Leia, recast somebody as Han, which, by the way, they did. They recast somebody as Han, right? They did Solo. They could have recast the entire cast, and then they could have just picked up where Return of the Jedi left off with the Admiral Thrawn series, which if you've read any of the Star Wars books, yes, I have. Then that's actually a really good storyline. And they could have just picked up where they left off and moved on into the future that way. And you would have gotten all of their new adventures.
So pretty much from the fans, it's unanimous that Thrawn would have been a good idea. But my problem is, after seeing how Disney has treated, how they've really handled everything concerning the new trilogy, I don't want them touching the good stuff. Like, I don't want them touching Thrawn. I don't want them touching the Old Republic, or Knights of the Old Republic era, that sort of thing. I don't think that'd go over well. They don't have a good track record. Let's just be honest, okay?
Alternatively, they could have landed the Star Wars universe in like a different place. And they're actually doing this on Disney Plus with The Mandalorian, which is kind of great, right? The Mandalorian is really fun. Jon Favreau directed it. They could have gone back and they could have used some of these characters and put them somewhere else in the Star Wars universe.
So this is actually the one I think would have been, I guess, the best idea in a sense. Not necessarily The Mandalorian, but, have the Star Wars universe, but something that doesn't relate to what we already have established. Because as we've seen in the sequel trilogy, continuity is not a thing. Like, the fact that these are sequels doesn't seem to register to Ryan and JJ. So I agree that they could have done something that's completely unrelated to the original and sort of Mandalorian-like, but I think you could have even done something in a different galaxy entirely, just in this Star Wars universe. But you could technically have followed up from where the original trilogy left off, just not like this.
So Disney actually has done this with a couple of their other series, right? Star Wars Clone Wars they did this with, and also Star Wars Rebels. And some of that stuff is really pretty fantastic. Okay, they could have done any of those things. Instead, what they chose to do was split the baby. We'll introduce new characters, but we will live off the nostalgia for the first films. You can't do that. And the reason you can't do that is because if you're nostalgic for the first films, you don't want to see bad things happen to your favorite childhood characters.
Here's the thing, though. They could have not mistreated your favorite childhood characters. Like, you can introduce new characters without having to shamelessly murder the old ones. Like, instead of Luke being a crotchety old hermit on an island, why couldn't he have been the master of a temple, and now he's taking this particular role in the galaxy, and Rey comes on the scene, and she has a role to play, and we follow her story, but we don't have to destroy Luke to do that. You don't have to murder the old characters to have new ones. And this is where I think I really have to part ways with Ben here, because you don't have to murder old characters or disrespect them or dishonor them or destroy their legacy, as we're going to see The Rise of Skywalker absolutely does again. You don't have to do that in order to have new characters. So I disagree on this point.
Spoiler alert, no one wants to see Han Solo die at the hands of his son like a loser divorced dad after leaving Leia alone for 20 years and flying around the galaxy smoking pot with Chewie in the Millennium Falcon. No one wants to see that. And that's what happens in Force Awakens.
Yeah, that's not the brightest moment of the series. I think we can all kind of agree with that one. I don't think that Han... I don't know why they brought Han back. Let's be honest. Why? Just why? Why did they bring the main characters back? Again, you could have done it well, but the way they did it, it was like they brought characters back to jettison them into space. And for some of them, that's literally what they did. Admiral Akbar, they did that in The Last Jedi. So I agree. No one wants to see their favorite characters from, 30 years ago come back and be completely different people and have their characters completely destroyed.
No one wants to see Luke, who is this hero who goes from being a whiny teenager to being this mature Jedi who is able to control himself to save his father. Nobody wants to see Luke become a misanthrope who milks aliens on a foreign planet while whining about his life and disparaging the Jedi tradition. No one wants to see that.
Yeah, and if you look at what Disney chucked out, the expanded universe, that's what no one was expecting, because that's not consistent with Luke's character, which is one of the big problems of The Last Jedi to begin with. But wait, Ben, are you telling me you didn't like the green milk scene? You didn't like that? Yeah, me either.
So the new series basically took all of your favorite characters your favorite old characters, and proceeded to ruin them except for Leia because Kathleen Kennedy has this feminist streak where the only characters who are allowed to be competent or good are apparently the female characters.
Yeah, the Force is female.
Okay, so that was the critique of this trilogy. They basically took all of my favorite characters from my childhood and they wrecked them so that they could promote a bunch of characters who sucked. Okay, Rey was a terrible character because you didn't know, not only you didn't know where she came from, but she was amazing at everything right off the bat, right? This was the biggest critique of the first part of this trilogy. The biggest critique was that Rey, who had not trained in the Force for half a second, was suddenly unbelievably good at it. And Ben Solo, right, Kylo Ren, who is Leia's kid with Han, who has been training with the Force since childhood, can be overtaken in a lightsaber battle by somebody who picked up a lightsaber half a second ago. Okay, that's not a thing. It's stupid. And everybody who watched the series knew it was stupid.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest critiques that you can offer for this trilogy, is that Rey is what you would call a Mary Sue. She's unbelievably good at everything, excuse me. She can beat people who've trained when she hasn't. And one of the qualities that a Mary Sue has is that everyone likes her. And the Rise of Skywalker does nothing to remedy this. Now, Ben's going to make the case that it does, but we'll get there in a moment.
Meanwhile, you had Poe, who was utterly incompetent. They tried to create kind of a new Han Solo character. The difference is that Han Solo in Empire Strikes Back, the entire story of Empire Strikes Back is Han Solo demonstrating that he is wildly competent at a lot of things. The entire Poe Dameron story is the dude is wildly incompetent until he's suddenly promoted to the head of the Rebel Alliance. Right?
Well, first off, Ben, you've made the mistake that The Last Jedi did in calling it the Rebels instead of the Resistance, but, the movies forgot it, so I guess you can be forgiven too. Secondly, Poe actually wasn't incompetent at first. He takes out an absurd, stupid amount of TIE fighters in the first scene we see him in an X-Wing in The Force Awakens. He takes out Starkiller Base. This guy is wildly competent. In The Last Jedi, he actually saves the Resistance by destroying the Dreadnought that, if he hadn't gotten it destroyed, would have destroyed the entire Resistance fleet after they come out of Lightspeed. So everything he does is actually pretty competent and pretty good. They just make him look like he was wrong for no good reason. Like, Poe's role from The Last Jedi on seems to be, hey, you did the right thing, but forget you, man. You're bad. You're a badman. Bad Poe.
Finn has no story arc at all. His entire story arc is that he was a stormtrooper. End of story arc. Nothing happens to him for the next 3 movies.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest wastes of a character, to be honest with you. Because imagine exploring what a stormtrooper who rebels, imagine exploring that kind of mindset. Imagine exploring how he would interact with the world, how he would see the world, the difficulties he would struggle with. But no, about 5 minutes after he rebels against the Empire, he's laughing as he blows his comrades out of his comrades 5 minutes ago. He just blows them out of the water, and he's giggling like a schoolgirl doing it the whole time, escaping with Poe. So yeah, they squandered him, but they squandered him back in The Force Awakens, and he's had no story arc. So again, I agree, for now.
So all of the new characters are completely boring, random. They should have killed Finn in Last Jedi. When he makes that heroic run, they should have killed him off.
Yeah, no, that's they should have. Wait, Ben, are you saying they shouldn't have had Rose come flying out of nowhere, wrecking them both at like a bajillion miles an hour, which would totally not have killed them, to say that we have to save what we love, not fight what we hate? You're saying you don't like that? Yeah, me either.
They probably should have killed Poe in Last Jedi. They should have had him pull the Admiral Holdo maneuver. Instead, they bring in Laura Dern to wear weird hair and do a light speed trick.
Nah, I don't think so. I think they probably should have had Akbar do... I mean, if you're going to do the lore-breaking hyperspace maneuver anyway, have Akbar do it instead of just chucking him out into space. But who knows? Maybe Mon Calamari fish people can survive in space. I don't know. Leia can, for who knows why. Don't worry, we're going to get to that. But I think that if you're going to have someone do that, why have some random purple-headed admiral do it? Just have the established meme generator in Admiral Akbar do it. Would have at least made some sense instead of having a character created and murdered off in the same movie who we had no attachment to anyway. At least Akbar would have been like, aw, I guess it's a trap.
That, by the way, if anybody could have figured that one out, they could have blown up the Death Star that way, like in Star Wars New Hope as well as Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, that is one of the major lore breaks, and as we're going to see in The Force Awakens, or excuse me, in The Rise of Skywalker, they try to address it, but they create more problems in attempting to address it. And this is where we're going to hit a problem, because I believe to Ben, trying to make up for a problem is as good as succeeding in trying to make up for that problem. And that is what's going to be the heart of his review. They tried to correct it, but let's let him make his case first.
Okay, so all of this is prefaced to say I hated Force Awakens and I hated Last Jedi. Rise of Skywalker is an attempt to buy all of that back. And understanding that this trilogy never should have happened, and understanding all the flaws of Force Awakens and Last Jedi, now you understand why I liked Rise of Skywalker, because they attempt to correct as many of these problems as they can while apologizing for the series ever existing, which is basically what this was.
So here's the problem. Apologizing for the series is one thing, but I don't think that's what JJ was doing. I think he was trying to make a good movie, but he failed. And I think in trying to make his good movie, he was trying to correct the problems that The Last Jedi brought up. I don't think he was trying to retcon his own work in The Force Awakens. I think he was specifically trying to retcon The Last Jedi. What we saw was the equivalent of two babies smacking each other with their toys, except for their toys cost $4 billion for Disney. You saw Rian Johnson first take all the stuff, like what you have here. JJ hands all of his toys to Rian. Rian proceeds to break them into tiny little pieces, and they were junk toys anyway, but Rian takes them and breaks them into tiny pieces, and then JJ comes and slaps Rian in the face while accidentally emptying his diaper on the tiny pieces that they had already broken. It doesn't make the series better that he was unhappy about it. It just means that the series took a hit because you have feuding directors. This is the problem of having two different guys, and they tried to have three, but that went down the tubes. This is the problem with having different people with different visions. JJ wasn't trying to retcon himself. He was trying to retcon Rian, and he did, but in doing so, he created so many problems. We'll get there. Let's let Ben back in.
So all of the stuff with Finn and Poe, no one cares about. All that stuff was dumb. No one cares about it. It's a waste of time. You have to do it. It's like the worst of J.J. Abrams. Like the film, it's not a spoiler to say the film opens with the Millennium Falcon light speed jumping, which just turns it into like a silly prop.
Well, it's funny you mention it because the light speed skipping, I believe it's what it's called. I think that's what they called it. Light speed skipping is because of what Rian did, but it wasn't necessary because Rian put the tracking through hyperspace on a gargantuan-sized ship called the Supremacy, and it was on all the other Star Destroyers too. But the idea is it took at least some sort of space to have it on your ship. But no, now these TIE fighters can track you through hyperspace. So I guess you didn't need that breaker room at all. You don't need it's just a little USB thing now. So it's JJ trying to retcon The Last Jedi and saying, well, they had a way around it, but they didn't need a way around it. They are TIE fighters. TIE fighters don't have that tech. End of story.
Like it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The entire Empire Strikes Back, which is the best Star Wars film, unquestionably, this is fact. This is known. Okay, Empire Strikes Back is all about basically maybe four topics. One is the Millennium Falcon. It's the entire thing in Empire Strikes Back is that the Millennium Falcon's hyperdrive is broken. Okay, that is the central plot device. In this movie, in the new movie, in Rise of Skywalker, the Millennium Falcon is fully on fire. And they fix it inside of 5 seconds flat. All of it.
Yeah, that sounds like a problem with the movie, doesn't it? I mean, it does to me. It also sounds like a problem to me when you have people flying a ship who when the landing gear doesn't work, like they can't deploy the landing gear, they treat it like it's a flipping airplane and run it into the ground at like a bajillion miles an hour instead of, hovering over the ground and setting down softly and being like, well, I guess that's what we have to do. It's not ideal, but at least we didn't run our spaceship into the ground like an idiot. And hey, you know how you need to get over to the destroyed Death Star over there that shouldn't be there at all because it was blown into 1,000 tiny pieces? why don't we just hover over there with the spaceship we have? No, we can't do that. Because nothing makes sense in the Millennium Falcon. Is broken when it's convenient, and the pilots are stupid when it's convenient. Man, I hate this movie.
Also, Empire Strikes Back is about Luke growing and realizing that he is insufficient. Okay, so that's the other topic. And also it's about Han Solo being wildly competent. Poe and Finn, they're wildly incompetent. The Millennium Falcon is made into a prop. Like, all that stuff is sort of the worst of J.J. Abrams. The stuff that's really good, okay, the stuff that's really good is actually quite good.
Oh boy, this is the part we have been waiting for. What is it that the Rise of Skywalker does really good? Ben, take it away.
The stuff that's good is that they buy back Han Solo's death. They give him sort of a new exit scene where he's not being killed by his son, where they cheat. He can't be a Force ghost because he didn't have the Force, but he basically is a Force ghost. He comes back. All these are spoilers, okay? Spoilers. You've been warned 1,000 times. You don't want to hear about it. You haven't seen the movie yet. Don't listen. Okay, so Han Solo comes back, and he talks with Kylo, and he basically woos Kylo back to the light side of the Force.
Ben, you do realize that scene, as is explained in the movie, is Ben Solo forgiving himself for being a massive jerk, right? Like he says, you're just a memory. And fake Han Solo says, yeah. So what you have in this scene is not Han Solo getting any... Han's dead. This is not Han Solo. This is a figment of Ben's imagination. He just got stabbed and then healed, which I'm guessing has some sort of effect on the guy's mind because he starts having hallucinations. But in his mind, Ben just forgave himself and convinced himself to leave the dark side. This isn't redeeming Han. Han didn't do this. This shouldn't be accredited to Han. Because Han didn't... Ben forgave himself. How does this make up for Han's death? It doesn't.
You find out that Leia, who uses the Force in new and bizarre ways in Last Jedi that are never explained, like she literally pulls herself back into a ship after being blasted out into space. And you're like, where the hell did that come from? Luke hasn't even done that. You're told in this movie that Leia was trained as a Jedi by Luke, which makes sense, right? In the books, she actually is. Right? In the books, she actually is trained as a Jedi by Luke. And that she decided not to become a Jedi at the last minute because she foresaw using the Force that if she became a Jedi, then her lightsaber would be used to kill Ben. Okay, so that all makes sense. So they retconned that.
So my problem with Leia in this movie is not that she was trained or anything like that. I don't have a problem with that. I think it actually kind of makes sense that she would be trained because she's in the same lineage as Luke. It makes enough sense. The problem with what she did in The Last Jedi and with The Rise of Skywalker here is not that she has the Force, it's that what the Force is now capable of doing is just absurd. Like, we have no explanation for what she did, whether she's trained or not, being able to just get shot out into space and survive because the Force. Now the Force is just becoming whatever you need it to be. It's a power that really has no limit. And you could say, well, it was the Force making a force field around her, no pun intended. But she gets ice on her skin, so clearly it's not this sort of barrier around her. And even if it was, since when can the Force do that? Wouldn't that be convenient in a lightsaber battle? So the idea isn't that it's bad that Leia was trained. The idea is that still doesn't explain her random Force ability. And that's a problem. Now, to the problem I had with Leia in The Rise of Skywalker, they should have let her die off screen. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a good situation. Obviously, no one's glad that Carrie Fisher died. But with Carrie Fisher being dead, I think it would have been best if, you open with like a somber funeral for Leia or something. Her scenes in this movie were really awkward. And it made me feel really bad because I didn't want to feel really awkward looking at dead Princess Leia talking to Rey. Like, it just didn't work. And I feel like the movie would have just been better with someone else being in that position. That's what I don't like about Leia in this movie.
And then the biggest retcon of all, the one that actually matters, and that answers why Rey is cool. Right? It answers the biggest question. Why is Rey even a thing? And the answer is because she's Palpatine's granddaughter, which is fantastic. Okay, that's a great reveal.
So, Ben, here's the problem. even with the explanation of her being in some great Force lineage, that doesn't explain how, without training, she can just fart out Force lightning. Like, it honestly looks like she's straining so hard she just lets a little fart of lightning out of her hands. That's not a good thing. It doesn't explain how she is wildly how she even knows that Force Mind Trick is even a thing in The Force Awakens, not to mention can use it without any form of training. She's questioning whether Luke is real, which means I'm guessing she doesn't even know about the Force at this point, and yet she's able to use it just because she heard about it. That doesn't explain these things. Saying that she's Palpatine's granddaughter can start providing an answer if you can explore it more and give her training, which she gets at least some in The Rise of Skywalker, but good grief, it's not enough. And by the way, she was already godly powerful before this, so why does she need training? Poe's right, she should have been out on the battlefield. But all that aside, this does not answer the problem. This is like saying, hey, this guy's got a gun to your chest. Well, now I've got a gun-proof shield on my body. It's just a reason because reasons. It doesn't actually, if you actually think into it, it doesn't solve your problem. The problem was she's a Mary Sue, and giving her a powerful dad or a powerful granddad doesn't fix the fact that she's still a Mary Sue.
That's great, because the most underrated Force ability person in the Star Wars series, because everyone's focused on Anakin Skywalker, on Vader, on Luke, on Leia, on Yoda, on Obi-Wan. Nobody's focused on the fact that Palpatine's an unbelievable badass with the Force, right? Palpatine is so strong in the Force that he basically defeats Yoda. He is able to conceal his identity as the Emperor for 3 movies. He's able to turn Anakin to the dark side. Like, Palpatine's an utter badass. And so they bring Palpatine back from the dead, which they sort of had to do. Palpatine's a great character.
Okay, so I can agree on one account. Palpatine's a great character. I disagree on another account. They did not have to. Now, Ryan did back JJ into a corner. It obviously wasn't JJ's original plan to go with Palpatine. Clear. The actor himself for Palpatine said after the Last Jedi came out, that's when he gets a call from JJ saying, "Hey, so we're thinking of bringing back Palpatine. What do you think?" So clearly it's not the original plan. But boy, you didn't have to undo Episode 6 by bringing Palpatine back. Especially you didn't have to bring him back with no explanation of how he got back. So Ben, are you telling me there's literally nothing else they could have done? Like, they couldn't have had Ben Solo or Kylo. They couldn't have had him be a good antagonist. They couldn't have, I don't know. Man, I'll tell you what. I would have rather them have Snoke, that Snoke that got killed in The Last Jedi, have been a clone or a hologram or something like that. Anything except for Palpatine. This was a terrible decision. And as bad as having Snoke have been a hologram or a clone or whatever in The Last Jedi, it would have made more sense and been more believable and been better for the lore if they had done that than bring Palpatine back. So no, they didn't have to do this.
They bring in all the old musical cues. They bring in all of the old stuff, which is the stuff that I like. So if you're a nostalgia person, right, if you're pissed at this series because you feel like it ruined your childhood, then this movie was an attempt to restore that.
Yeah, it was an attempt. It was a try. they gave it the old college try, but they didn't succeed. That's the problem. They didn't succeed, and just trying to bring back those feels and trying to have all the payoffs without doing the groundwork to get you there. And by the way, giving people seizures in the process because you can't figure out lighting, that doesn't help.
It was an attempt to make Han cool again. Fairly successful.
No. They made Ben's memory of Han cool again.
It was an attempt to make Leia cool again. Successful.
Leia wasn't really that destroyed in this trilogy, but they kind of cheapened her character by making her still be a character when the actress is dead.
It was an attempt to make Luke cool. There's a great scene where Luke does, even though he's dead, right? Luke does this thing that Yoda does while he's alive in Empire. Remember in Empire, there's this scene where Yoda raises the X-Wing from the swamp because Luke fails to do so. Here, Luke is able to do that as a Force Ghost to hand over the X-Wing to Rey. That's great.
Oh, Ben. Yeah. This is not great. Now, this is not solely the fault of the Rise of Skywalker, but they have broken Force ghosts. Why? Because now they can interact with the physical world. See, they didn't define all that much with Force Ghosts in the original trilogy, which is fine because the less you define, the less you back yourself into a corner. But with the sequel trilogy, with Yoda knocking Luke on the head and, I don't know, calling lightning down from heaven, we've confirmed that Force Ghosts are capable of interacting with the physical world. And now Luke lifting the X-Wing out of the water just goes to further confirm this theory. And to confirm the fact that he catches the lightsaber when Rey throws it. This confirms Force Ghosts can interact with and affect the physical world. In fact, they can even hold a lightsaber. So, my question is, why aren't they using this ability? Why doesn't Luke Force Ghost himself over to Palpatine and stab him in the back? You can do this because apparently this is how Star Wars works now. This is how the Force is. You see why I say the Force is broken? The Force can do whatever they want it to do, but the problem is when you establish a rule, it's now a rule. You have broken the lore. It's not cool when Luke does this. It's not a callback to Yoda. Well, it might be a callback to Yoda. That might have been the purpose, but the problem is Yoda was alive. What's the point of being alive anymore in Star Wars? It seems like it's a lot better if you're a Force Ghost because you can do all the things you could do when you're alive and no one can kill you anymore. The Force is broken. Force Ghosts are broken. The lore is gone.
The callback scene where they find the old Death Star from Return of the Jedi and Rey has to confront herself, which is another callback to Empire. And then when they're playing the old musical cues. All that stuff is great.
Yeah, the Bilbo scene. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird in general that the Death Star is together. I mean, watch episode 6, folks. It got blown to smithereens. That chunk is not there. That's not how it got blown up. And by the way, this means Sheev got blown. Sheev is that's Emperor Palpatine's name. His first name is Sheev. Seriously, Google it. But Sheev got blown up twice in the end of episode 6, and he's back. It's like nothing can die in this movie. Rey dies, she gets brought back. Palpatine, he was dead, now he's back. Which, by the way, why do we know he's dead again? Who knows? The Death Star, it was gone. Now it's back, mostly, even though there was just tiny pieces of it left. Nothing can stay dead in this movie.
What they do with Kylo Ren, bringing him back to the light side, is pretty great.
Now, here's where I will say I kind of saw this coming with Kylo Ren coming back to the light side for a couple reasons. After The Force Awakens, seeing him kill Han, I said, there's no way they're going to let Han's death go without some sort of meaning to it, so I figured they're going to have Kylo come back to the light side. I kind of figured that sealed that he was coming back. Because you could see he was conflicted and all that sort of stuff. I felt like that was somewhat set up. I saw it coming. I don't think the way they went about it, having him get sucker stabbed by Rey, and then healed, and then he forgives himself and chucks his lightsaber away that he might really need later in the movie. I don't think that was necessarily the right way to go about it, but I think like it was set up, and I do like that they brought him back, despite all the character issues they've had with him being, he's just been hard to pin down, put it that way. But I do think it was set up. Even the trailer going into this movie, when Luke said no one's ever truly gone, and then you see the Rise of Skywalker, people assumed, well, that's Skywalker's. No. When Luke said that in The Last Jedi, he was talking about Kylo, and I think that was them foreshadowing the fact that he was going to come back to the light side. Now, I don't think they did enough with it, but the fact that he came back, I do like that. I think it was set up. I just don't think it was necessarily executed well, but the idea that it happened, I'm fine with.
J.J. Abrams does a great job in setting up a good reveal. So for several movies, you've been seeing basically Kylo and Rey Force Skyping one another. They can talk over long distances. In this movie, they can actually sword fight sort of telepathically, but it has real-world ramifications. One is in one place, one is in the other place, and they're having these lightsaber battles, but it actually has physical ramifications in the places where they're having the lightsaber battles. And so that ends with a really fantastic reveal.
So Ben, and I know you're not going to watch this, but I'm going to act like I'm talking to you because I'm responding to you. Do you think it's a good idea that the Force can now teleport matter? Like when Rey puts her hand behind her back with a lightsaber and suddenly Kylo has it. Do you think this doesn't break the Force somehow? Do you think that this is something that wouldn't have ever been convenient at all before in the movies? See, it's like Force healing. They bring it in this movie. So, okay, just like you, Ben, noticed that with light speed, that should have been used to destroy the Death Stars. It's such a lore break. In this movie, what the Force does in this movie would have been really convenient in other movies. Healing. Obi-Wan could have healed Qui-Gon. Jedi at the arena in the second Star Wars, Attack of the Clones, they could have been healing each other. Healing could have been used in many instances previous to this, so now you have to explain why it wasn't used. I'm not against the idea of Force healing, but you got to put a big, heavy price on it, and you've really got to regulate it, and you have to explain why it wasn't used before. It's the same thing with Force teleportation. In Force Skype teleporting Vader's helmet around like it's, a kickball or whatever. You've got to explain why this hasn't happened before, and they don't, because really they're just making it up as they go. So is it neat visually? Is it kind of cool? Sure, but it breaks the movies that came before it, and this is the problem. These are sequels. And if they're not treated like sequels, you're going to break the lore that has been set up leading into these.
Right, all that stuff is great. So everything with Kylo, everything with Rey, everything with Palpatine is great. Everything with Leia and Han is really good. Like, all that stuff is good. Finn and Poe continue to be disposable. All the other fringe characters end up being disposable.
Everything with Rey and Kylo is good. Oh boy. So, you're telling me that Kylo chasing Rey down in his TIE fighter when either A, his objective is to not kill Rey, in which case, what if she doesn't jump out of the way in time and splats on your windshield? That would have been awkward, right? Or B, your intention is to kill her, in which case, use your dang blasters, you idiot. Neither of those really work. You're saying that's okay. You're saying that's great. You're saying that the Force teleportation, that's great. You're saying that Kylo not noticing that Rey's holding the dagger that was in his quarters when he could see it and waiting till he sees the Vader helmet to know where Rey is, that's great. You're saying that Force healing someone from death, that's great. You're saying that Rey healing someone is fine, but when Kylo heals somebody, he kills himself. For some reason, he dies. Now maybe it's because you could only have, it took a life force worth of energy to heal her. Sure, whatever. The problem is, it's just broken. Everything is broken. And by the way, what was with the Reylo kiss at the end? Like, where did we see any setup for them being in love? Last she knew, he stabbed and murdered the guy who was her father figure, and now you're in love with him? What? And I think it's the funniest thing that right after he kisses her, he just plops over dead. It was so funny. It's not like he just slowly fades off. It's just kiss, bang, he's on the floor. It was so good. My favorite part of the movie. Actually, my favorite part was where Rey dies, because I think she should have stayed dead. Because think of this. Think of Rey dying, and Kylo has to take over. And now everyone's like, oh, Rey's dead, and here's Kylo. What happened? Could you imagine the implications here, and where the story could go from there, with Kylo being turned back to the light side, having committed mass genocide, destroying billions of people? There's so much that could have been done, but then Kylo had to, kill himself saving Rey. Anyway, no, not everything with Rey and Kylo works. In fact, I would say a vast majority of it doesn't. Rey's still a Mary Sue. Their connection breaks the Force pretty much every time it happens. It makes no sense. It's awful. It is flat awful.
There is this lesbian moment that's been much talked about, because at the very end of the movie, they show a lesbian couple kissing, and it's obviously Disney trying to shoehorn in the, okay, glad we know you're there. It's very silly, and it's sort of like that moment at the end of the Avengers Infinity War, where all the females land in one part of the battlefield, and you're like, okay, really, was that, come on. Okay, that's sort of the same thing here. None of the couples are kissing except this one lesbian couple. You're like, all right, I get it, Disney. I get Fine, you fulfilled your PC quota for the day. Whatever, man. But it's pretty shoehorned in. It's not a big deal. It's just silly.
So wait, you're trying to suggest that Disney actually doesn't care about groups like lesbians and women and that sort of stuff? They're just trying to make money off them? Say what?
Okay, but overall, the critics are savaging this film. All it tells you about critics, all you need to know is they gave The Last Jedi like 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, and they gave this one like 53%. They didn't understand Star Wars.
You know, this is the thing. You'll find with movies that critics can love or hate something, and that actually has no bearing on its actual quality. Sometimes they like it because it has great, political things that they want them to push, and sometimes they hate it because it doesn't have them. So it's not reflective of the quality. Now, the score from the audience generally can give you a better idea of that, because if you look at the score of the audience from The Last Jedi, it's abysmal. And if you look at the score of the audience for The Rise of Skywalker from anywhere except for Rotten Tomatoes, which is really suspicious, it's also not very good, though a little better than The Last Jedi last I checked. That tells you a lot more about the quality. So, yeah.
You didn't understand it. This movie understands better how the Force works.
Hang on, whoa. Did you say this understands better how the Force works? Okay, Ben. Debate me. I am catcalling you, sir. This movie does not understand how the Force works. Debate me. Right now. This movie does not understand the Force. It broke the Force permanently. The Force is gone. Goodbye. It murdered it. Rey stabbed it in the chest and didn't force heal the Force. It's gone.
This movie understands better how the weapons work. This movie understands better the dynamics between the light and the dark side. It understands Palpatine.
Yeah, it understands Palpatine. The guy who got blown into a bajillion pieces. I use that word a lot. I need to come up with another word. The guy who got blown into a quadrillion, which is a real number, who got blown into a quadrillion pieces twice, and yet he's still alive in this movie, somehow. Which they never explained because the dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. Yeah, like, having a body after it gets blown to smithereens. Like, yeah, that is kind of unnatural. One would assume that wouldn't happen, so I agree. But how did it happen? So no, I don't think it really understood Palpatine that well.
I've heard a lot of objections that this film basically makes the Skywalker-Vader interaction completely irrelevant. But that's true the minute that Palpatine lives, right? I mean, and by the way, that's true the minute that the Rebel Alliance fails. Once the Republic falls again to the First Order, then that whole thing became irrelevant. The new trilogy made that irrelevant, which is why they should have fast-forwarded and taken it to some other part of the universe.
Yeah, that's the point. That's why it's bad that they brought Palpatine back. That's one of the major reasons it's bad, because now Vader did nothing. He threw him down a tube, and apparently Palpatine just surfed his way down to Endor, and then hopped on a taxi to whatever the heck his planet is. And Luke did nothing, except for fail to actually kill the Emperor, and then become a crotchety old hermit because he thinks his nephew did a bad. This makes the original trilogy completely irrelevant. You're right. That's why they shouldn't have brought Palpatine back. No, it's not true the minute the Rebel Alliance fails. Because the Rebel Alliance didn't fail. They defeated the Empire. Last we knew, the Empire was gone. Their Emperor's gone. Darth Vader's gone. They destroyed the Imperial Death Star, the second one. That we know of, the Rebels are now in charge. They create a new republic. It looks like the Rebels succeeded. It doesn't look like they failed. Bad guys are going to happen. Like, okay, the First Order rises. That doesn't make episodes 4, 5, and 6 irrelevant. This doesn't undo their accomplishments. It just means, yeah, bad guys are a thing. That's going to happen every now and then. You're going to have to fight them. That's cool. That doesn't undo the accomplishments of the original trilogy. What does is when you start resurrecting people who the original trilogy made the accomplishment of them being the death of that person you resurrected. Now you've undone their accomplishments. So no, having the First Order doesn't undo the original trilogy. Having Palpatine absolutely does. Now Rey gets Luke's accomplishments. Not Luke. Luke gets to die as a sad hermit, and Rey is now the sole hero of Star Wars. Thank you, Rise of Skywalker.
The part that you care about is all the stuff with the Emperor, and all the stuff on Endor doesn't matter as much.
So, you're telling me that you think you should ignore the part where the Star Destroyers that have technology that can blow planets up can't figure out which direction up is, we should ignore that part? You're telling me they need a tower to tell them which direction is up? That's not the shining moment of the movie? You know what, Ben? I agree. That wasn't the best part of the movie. Oh man, this movie's so bad. And before you say, no, that helped them navigate out of the space cancer. No, it wasn't. Watch it again. Poe says that tower needs to go down because then these large ships don't know which way is up out there. Their whole plan was to destroy the Star Destroyers because they don't know which direction is up. Let that sink in.
That's pretty much this movie. Everything between Rey and Kylo and the Emperor and all the old characters is great, and everything else is disposable. But good for J.J. Abrams for at least trying to go back and unruin everything that he ruined in Force Awakens and that Rian Johnson then proceeded to wreck in Last Jedi.
Yeah, I can appreciate the fact that J.J. tried to undo The Last Jedi. I can appreciate it. I really can, because, hey, the fans hated The Last Jedi. At least a lot of them did. They hated it because it was an awful movie that broke the lore of Star Wars and destroyed all the characters we love. You're right on that. But trying to undo something and saying, hey, I'm helping you. Well, so say you have a friend who gets mugged in the alley and he's bleeding profusely and you need to stop the bleeding, but you don't know anything about medicine. So in order to stop the bleeding, you start just punching his wounds like, hey, I am going to undo your wounds. Watch me undo them as you take out a knife and stab him in the throat. Hey, I am undoing this. It is my attempt to fix you. It's an attempt. Sure, they tried, but you still murdered the guy. It's still it was still not a good thing that you did this. And that's what the Rise of Skywalker was. If you are so incompetent that to heal the person, you are going to beat the ever-living snot out of them, maybe just don't. Maybe just don't. Because you killed him. He was already dead, basically, because you couldn't save him. But now you've put in your hat in the killing him ring. So no, Rise of Skywalker wasn't good. Now, after this, the Ben's review is basically over. And I gotta say, Ben was right on some things here. He was right on saying, realizing that this movie was trying to undo The Last Jedi. He was right that JJ was trying to apologize for Rian Johnson. He was right that the last movies were pretty awful. Last Jedi especially. The Force Awakens, I don't think it's very good, but it's definitely not as bad as The Last Jedi. But to say that this was a good movie, I'm sorry, it wasn't. There are so many obnoxious things in this movie. You could go on for days just walking through all the absurd plot holes, conveniences, MacGuffins. Just everything in this movie is so painfully bad. From a writing standpoint, I think there's more problems in Rise of Skywalker than there is in TLJ, The Last Jedi. But I think The Last Jedi is more malicious, and it's bad on a more weighty level in that they destroy Luke, they destroy light speed, that sort of stuff. So I think that The Last Jedi is still worse. I hate The Last Jedi way more than I hate The Rise of Skywalker. But that doesn't mean The Rise of Skywalker gets off the hook. It was still a bad movie. That being said, thank you for joining me. If you have any comments to leave me, oh boy. People get pretty passionate about Star Wars. I did in this video too, because this is one that I've thought through a lot and tried to just be honest with. I really want good Star Wars, but we don't have it right now. And I'm sorry about that, because I love Star Wars. The Star Wars universe is one of my favorite, next to probably Lord of the Rings. But anyway, thank you for joining me. This isn't an attack on Ben. This isn't saying that he doesn't know anything about film. Don't take it that way. That's obviously not the point here. The point is, I think he's wrong. And I wanted to give you the reasons why I thought that. But thank you so much for joining me. I'll catch you next time.